to take us and also to pick up on our questions. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone on the call, we have Chef Jerry. Chef Jerry was at one time being the head chef for Novotel. Novotel, the Accor Group, is an international hospitality or hotel which has over 1,000 venues across the world. He happened to be one. He has worked in the Lagos office. He has headed the Port Harcourt, the Port Harcourt kitchen as well, being the head chef. He is also a consultant to a couple of culinary businesses, different eat out, food spot, and he was one time the also consultant for Park Vegas in Delta State, Abraka. So quite a wide experience within the culinary and hospitality space. And one thing that has been consistent that I've seen in him is that he has been everywhere he goes into, he knows how to bring down their food costs, ensure efficiency and effectiveness, and bring about profitability in the system. To speak to us this evening is no other person but Chef Jerry. Chef Jerry, over to you, please.
So, first off, let me start by saying thank you very much also for the very, very gracious speech you've made about me. Sometimes I feel I don't have all of these qualities that you say I have, but thank you so much. And yes, with over 10 years of experience in the food industry, I think I just like every other person, you would start from level 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 until I became a head chef in Lagos. Was transferred to Port Harcourt, and later on I became head chef for the country. So all of that is out of a result of consistency and knowing if a company takes you into their umbrella or underneath their umbrella, they expect that you can save them cost every or cut down on cost. Every company who is currently operating are honestly looking to make some money, especially if you're not an NGO. So if you're running, you have running costs. You're not just spending money or wasting money. You're expecting that somehow you can make money back in return. And so the first thing, if you work in any organization, right, even especially if you're working in an FA in a hospitality, the hospitality industry, every company would show more value to the staff that helps them to cut costs and to increase revenue. Keep this in mind. This is the first thing you should always remember. Even if you are working, I like to also see the family as an institution, as a company. Even if you're the wife of a home and you're able to bring so much quality into your house, whereby you're also reducing costs, so much value will be accorded to you. So every single institution, every single family, every single company, they will always put you first. If you consider this person can save us cost, and they can also, with the little money that you're spending, can bring about maximum profit. And that is what we think we are talking about today. How can you monitor your costs from plates to profits, maximizing food cost efficiency? It's not just maximizing food costs, but the efficiency. So, meaning that if you're working with a 22% food cost, what that means is if you're setting a plate of food for 10,000 naira, for example, and working,
Yes, sir.
so what that means is if you're working, let's say with a 10,000 naira, you want to price. Bear in mind that food costing comes first before pricing. Bear in mind that even before, because I'm trying to make sure that this captures, is especially for those who are about to start a company or work in a company or work as a chef or work in the hospitality industry, food cost comes first. It is not vice versa. It is not you set your price before you know food cost. No, you know food cost first before you set your price, and then you after you've done that, the onus will not be on you to practically see that you are constantly trying to reduce your cost, whereas leaving your efficiency, leaving your performances as optimal. So that's exactly what we are talking about today. So I'm just going to go right into it. And also want to tell you a bit of my story. So this has always been my driving force. I had done a bit of culinary school out of the country. I went to South Africa to school, and one thing that they always sang and always drove into our minds or into our hearts is the fact that we need to watch your cost. if you're doing, no matter how nice or how tasty your meals are, and your cost is not being watched, then there's something. Especially right now that the economy is really biting the dust. All right. So let's just move right into it. So there are a few terminologies that I would like us to look at today. First of food cost. When you say food cost, what comes to your mind? Um, this is the ratio, and this is like in layman term. This is the ratio of costs of ingredients. That is assuming we are talking about um, restaurants or kitchen in the hospitality sector or something. This is the ratio of costs of ingredients, food inventory. Now, I'm saying food inventory in brackets is because see, costing is not a day lecture. It takes a lot. So there's a lot there's a way to determine your cost. If you're working in a restaurant, it's different. If you're working in a restaurant in a hotel, it's different. If you're working in a roadside restaurant, all the formulas are quite different. For example, in a hotel, in a restaurant, let me just give you a random figure for a restaurant. For example, it is always going to be your opening stock plus your bought items minus your closing stock. This will give you the value of your direct costs at the end of the month. So I didn't put that here, but so I just want to explain why I said why I said food inventory. So that is what it means. So for stock count to be able to hold, or for you to have a proper reports or recording of what your costs ratios are, you need to have proper inventory, proper stock counting, beginning of the month and end of the month, so you can know what's happening. Even for your houses, if you're going to do a market list, it's good that you have a market list you have records of everything you bought, so you know, okay, at the end of this month, this is how much we spend for food in the house. So you say, oh, we are probably eating too much, we have to cut down the cost. If you probably keep on the market list, you say, okay, on Monday we went to buy food 50,000. Next, in the other Monday, we went to buy 70,000. You say, okay, at the end of the month, we're going to spend 240,000, and we're a family of four. Okay, maybe we should have to cut things down. It might not be now what food costing is saying here in this sense is not you compromising on your standards, but you can always substitute the expensive things for other things that are not so expensive. If you need to derive some ingredients, you might have to do that. For example, if you were buying pig milk before and you look at the requirement and see that, okay, oh, pig milk also is good, but Dano gives you almost the same requirements as pig milk. Instead of buying pig milk at 750, now let's go back to Dano and buy Dano at 650. So that way you're not minimizing your standard of living. However, you're maximizing your costs. But you so now the first part about food cost is understanding your food inventory, how to count and calculate it. If you work in a restaurant, you're about to start a restaurant, it's always that formula always works. So your opening stock, let's say 1st of January, everything you're opening with, you calculate them, put a monetary value to them. Whatever you buy in the middle of the month, you add to that. Then whatever you have used, you subtract. So whatever is left at the end of the month, you subtract from all that you've gotten from the beginning to get what you've used, and you can see the monetary value of your used item. If you have a question about this, I can tell you later about, or you can just leave me a DMs. I will respond. So basically, that's how to find your cost. And so in layman term, this is a ratio of cost of ingredients, and food costs would always be in ratios. Let me explain. If your if your um, if your pricing, if your selling price, let's say you run a restaurant, your selling price is at 1 million, and you bought that item for 250,000. We can say that your food costs, or your yeah, let's just for example, your food cost is 25%. It's going to be in ratio. So your food cost is 25% of your total selling price. That's if you're selling for 1 million and then you bought it at 250,000. So it's 25% of your total. So it's always going to be in ratio. That's how your food cost is going to be. So 25 is to 100. That's how it's going to be. Um, so this is a ratio of food cost of ingredients, food inventory, and the revenue that those ingredients generate when the food items are sold. So it's not just how much you've sold, but the revenue. So you're looking at how much you're selling versus how much you bought. to get the amounts that you're selling and what you're making out of it. So it's very important that you understand this terminology as we move on. So a profit, like we all know, I'm sure if I ask everybody, they know what profits are, is a financial gain, especially the difference between the amount earned and the amount spent in buying, operating, or producing something. So the profit would be, oh, I am going to buy, let me say I want to sell a piece of furniture, and I buy the furniture for 70,000 and I'm selling it for 210,000. So your profit is going to be 200, your going to be your selling price minus your cost price. And if you want to find your ratio, I already know that is 33.3%. If you want to find your ratio, you would now have to do your cost price over your cost price over your selling price times 100. All this is quite a very, it sounds a bit complicated, but it's very important that if you're running a business, that the mathematics that you must know, you must do every day. You must ensure that you are on top of it to understand, am I making profit? And bear in mind that all that we are talking about now is direct cost. And what's direct cost? A place that can be directly tied, oh sorry, a price or a cost, I beg your pardon, that can be directly tied to the production of specific goods or services. So your direct cost as a company, for example, if you run a hotel and if you run a restaurant and you're selling rice and beans and meat, your direct cost would be the amount of rice you're buying from the market, the meat, the fish, the oils, the vegetables, the seasoning, the sauce, all of that, those are your direct costs. However, you cannot ascertain indirect costs without a financial software. So we most times just do that is really complicated. Most times what we do is we try to derive it and then distribute it amongst every plate in percentage. But that is not for you to bother yourself. Knowing that, um, now I'm just going to give you how to come up with an indirect cost. So your indirect cost would be how much are you spending for light, transportation, for labor? Am I paying salaries? Those are going to be your indirect costs. Am I paying for power? Your indirect costs. How much am I paying for water? Because you cannot quantify them, you can't cost them per plate of food. Bear in mind that food cost is per plate, per item, per selling item. You do food costs per selling item. I'm going to show you something at the end of this. It's an example of a food costing that I've done for several hotels, and you can see how it's done. So there'll be costing per item, there will be costing global ratio for all the items put together. So let me go back to my page. I'm sure I don't have any DMs. Um, so yeah, basically that's what it's like. So your indirect cost sometimes, in most cases, you might be unable to uh, to ascertain it because not it is not it's not that easy to ascertain, but there are formulas you could use. That's why I say it's not a day's training, but the essence of this is just for you to understand why food costing must be at the back of your mind when you are running a business, you're starting a business, or you're even running your home. It's very important that you must understand this, and you'll get to that soon. And like I said, your indirect costs includes costs which are frequently referred to as overhead expenses. Your overhead expenses like your salaries, your light bill, your water bill, your telephone costs, your airtimes, the incentive for staff. I'm giving 5,000 naira for everybody who makes this target. Those are your overhead costs, and then those are your indirect costs. So they cannot be. You have to use a software to ascertain them or a particular calculation to ascertain it, given that you have the total information of everything you're spending. Because even if you are looking at a home, you go to the market, you buy everything you need to buy to cook for your family. How do you ascertain the water you're using? Because nothing is free. The water you're using, the lights you're using, the gas you're using, the transport cost, your labor cost, all those things would amount to something. So it's important that they are considered when doing costing. So why do you need food cost control? A good restaurant owner has food costing in the palm of their hands. Constantly monitoring this fluctuating market change gives you the flexibility to adjust your food prices or substitute your ingredient constituents to maximize cost and maintain quality. So, like I said earlier, there's nobody that don't need to have their costing done. Even for Pastures Nigeria, I'm sure that they do, because if you once you're going to supply items to this vendor or that vendor, and maybe they're giving you a 20% markup on every item you supply, you also need to know that okay, 20, how much, what's the frequency that we are supplying? Once you know the frequency you're supplying, you'll be asking myself, okay, if I look at this frequency with this markup and how much I'm getting, will I be able to pay my staff? Will I be able to expand with the savings we're going to have? And will I be able to do this and pay for transportation and all of that? So costing is very, very important. And that is why you need it. So like I said, I'm using a restaurant as a because most especially restaurant owners and people who work in hospitality, this is what you need so much. And then trust me, the moment you start to take recognition and be very conscious about food costing, you say your own value in that company begins to go higher. Try this and see. You come back and tell me that Chef Jerry said so. Because the moment I realized, and this was one thing that pushed me up the ladder, I realized I needed to bring value to my company. And how can you bring the highest value you can bring to your company is saving them cost and making them money, because every company is there to make money. And if you can save them cost on one hand and make them money on the other hand, you skyrocket to the top in no long dis or no distant time. So it's why it's very important that you understand this, especially if you're in the hospitality industry. So a good restaurant owner has food cost in their palm, and this is very important. You must know it. If you ask me, oh because I should have said this from the beginning. On the first of May, I beg your pardon. I'm starting a new restaurant. It's called Meal Box by Chef Jerry. It's going to be in Port Harcourt, and it's basically, what we are doing is home deliveries and office deliveries. It's literally, like I said, a meal box, but every meal is specially crafted and designed and made by myself and my team of my able team, who are always there to support me. But you'll be surprised to know that immediately I decided to go into this business, the first thing I did was I drawed my menu, designed my menu, and I did the costs for that, because I must know at every point in time. Now, there's a format for cost I can share with anybody who's interested. You can reach out to me anytime. I'll share it with you. Now, with that costing format, all you need to do is just impute the new prices, and you see in real time what your cost ratio is. I'm going to show you at the end of this class. So in real time. So in case the price of yams in the market goes from 500 to 700, all you need to do in that costing format that I've designed is something that you can use anywhere in the world. Just impute, oh, yam change from 500 to 700, and immediately you see your cost ratio as it is right now. So you must always know this. You have to have your food soldiers in the markets knowing how much are these prices right now. So because this is like your power. This is what you need to know every point in time. So, like I said, constantly monitoring the fluctuating market. Nigeria has a very volatile market. All our prices are fluctuating every minute. It's going up and coming down, going up, but it never comes down. Sometimes comes down, but mostly goes up. So it's very important that if you're running a business in Nigeria, or you are working in a business that needs this kind of service, you are always monitoring the fluctuating prices. So this is just one of the. This is just an example of why you need food cost control. And like I said, in your family, if you're cooking for your homes, or if your wives who are not here probably, you can advise them. Okay, let's just have a total cost of what we are spending per month on food. You draft it out. Every single thing you spend, you draft it out. That way you can see, okay, how much one person is eating or how much we are using, and all of that. Which means you do your opening stock, your closing stock, do all of those things, and see how much you're making or how much you're eating. Juxtapose that figure with how much you're making, and you know, oh, I need to stop this, or I need to reduce that, or something. So let's just move on. So, three food costing significance in a restaurant or business. So, like I said, I'm trying to highlight for basically um, restaurants and businesses. So, like I've also said, food costs maximizes profits. Um, when talking about food costs, the first thing, oh my god, my battery, I said so. When talking about food costs, the first thing that would pop out to mind is how can I reduce it? Every time your mind because things always go up and they barely come down. You should be thinking, um, how can I reduce it? How can I further bring down the food cost? And then this is why this is significant. And you cannot know what to reduce until you have a clear picture of what each meal on your menu is making and is costing you to make, and how much you're making from each meal. So it's very, very important that you look at it like that. How can I reduce it? Simply because cutting costs means maximize profitability. So yes, if you cut your cost, let's say you're selling at 10,000 and you're it cost you 2,500 to produce that meal, and then you're able to reduce your costs to 2,000 naira, you have more profit to work with. You can decide to, let us add more value to the meals, which would always come in handy. You can decide to do other things with the extra money you're making from it. So simply because cutting costs means maximize profitability, food cost is continuous practice because food cost constantly changes, as does your sales, staff, many and many other factors. So what are factors that can affect food costing as well, which would be your staff. If you work in an organization that they're always changing staff, know that every staff will come back and get trained on knowing how to recipe standardization, which is one of the things we do in Chef Jerry's consulting, my consulting firm. We try to make sure we standardize your recipe. So every meal, if you tell me how much, if I come to your house, I can tell you and see what you're using, I can tell you how much your meal is costing you because I've done it 100 times and more. And I can look at it and tell you, okay, this is what it's costing. And what standardization of recipe would mean is you are that's if you wonder what KFC does or Chicken Republic or Genesis if you're in Port Harcourt, why you go to Chicken Republic here in Port Harcourt or Chicken Republic here in Lagos and it tastes the same. It's recipe standardization, and that's the first way to reduce cost. Once you can standardize your recipe, making sure that okay, if you want to cook a bowl of rice, you need 2 grams of seasoning, you need zero point 0.5 grams of salt, you need 200 ml of water, for example, 20 ml of oil, you need 200 grams of rice, and that will give you one portion. That is exact. So you're cooking 10, you just multiply by 10. It is the same recipe. You're cooking 100, you multiply by 100. But the first thing you need to do is understanding, oh, what it costs me to make a plate of food by hereby um, calculating it per portion. The second thing is you're going to be in full control. The raw materials and ingredient prices are always increasing and consequently cause your food cost to rise. The uncomfortable factor will give you a disadvantage for your profit margin. Knowing your food cost every now and then keeps you informed of what's happening and information is power. Um, so it gives you control. For example, that's why in every organization, your procurement person must work hand in hand with. If you are the chef, you must work with the chef. If you're the F&B person, you must work together because, and if you're the procurement person, you must have at your right back pocket how much all these things are costing per time. So you need to know what you're. If not, you see your cost gradually growing and wondering what's happening. It's just growing. I don't know it's very important that we understand these factors. That's why a lot of companies are folding up, are closing up because they don't understand. Just like Demola rightly said, every company I go to consult for, the first thing I'm looking at is their numbers. When I see their numbers, I try and see what their overhead costs and their daily cost runnings are. I look at their numbers, and if it's not given the percentage they should give, for example, a restaurant and hotel should make between 25. Cost ratio should be between 25 to 33%. So if that organization is making 100 million on food, you cannot spend more than 33 million naira to make the direct cost, like I said, for food. So the cost of buying meat, fish, rice, everything should not be maximum 33 million to give you 100 million because you know that when you add your other overhead cost, it might come to about 55 million, and you still need 45 million for growth, for profits, and all of that. Every business running must make profit. So it's very, very important. So if I go to any company, the first thing I'm going to look at your numbers, and I'm trying to make sure that your cost is going down. Every company has something that is really high on the cost on the high side that can be worked on. So finally, on that point, we have strategic price planning. So like I said, price planning comes after you've done your cost or you've done your cost review. If you're working in a restaurant, you can do your price planning, and like I've stated here, the direct food cost of restaurants in a hotel, for example, needs to be between 25 to 33%. Every business sector has an acceptable pricing format. So what pastures will need as a costing will be different from what a restaurant in a hotel would need, or what a restaurant and a solo restaurant would need, or what a lounge would need. They all have different costing formats according to their overhead cost. The overhead cost is what determines or how much your markup prices should be at. So just gonna go back here and quickly show you something. One moment. Kevin, I can't. Do I have any questions that Kevin I need to attend to before I show you what I want to show you?
Let me check now.
Huh?
So we have a question here. So can you hear
Okay,
me?
I can hear you clearly.
All right. So what should the direct food cost for regular restaurants and eat out be? Then
Okay,
what should
that's a very
food cost for quick service restaurant be? I think that is quite a simple. I'm not quite sure, but that's a question as well.
okay. So that's a very good question.
Yeah, so the idea is people can get the figures for different industries too, so that this can help. At least this will be a very strong takeaway, so that everyone here begins to know that if their food cost is above this limit, then that means they are breaking the roof. They're already working. They're already gradually strolling into fold off.
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm trying to show you a costing format, but because my phone that is crashed is giving me a lot of issues. I'm trying to sign into my Gmail on the computer, but apparently it's asking for a pass for my phone. So what do I do? So I'm just have to explain it to you. And I'm also going to send a format to Damola. So maybe for everybody who's interested, you can have a format of that food costing sample emailed to you. Before I go into the question, so every food costing would have like at the end of it, we have a global ratio. So just like I'm just trying to explain the costing format before you receive it. So the global ratio is if you have 20 food items on your menu, obviously not everything will give you the same profit margin. For example, and so the higher the food, the costlier the food item, the lower your profit margin. So let me give you an example. If you're buying prawn for, let's say you're buying a kg of prawn for 15,000, and I want to sell the kg of prawn, and I remember I told you there's 33% for 33% food cost ratio for hotels, restaurants in a hotel, and you'd see that um, it's going to come to about, if I want to do for 33%, that if I'm buying for 15,000, I will be selling that item for at least 55,000 because it won't come, the prawns won't come on its own. It come with a side. It come with maybe chips or rice or something. So if you put all those costs, it comes with maybe 55, which is too high for prawn. So what you might now do is you might now it's your global ratio that must be that ratio. So if your ratio is it must be between 25 to 3% for restaurants in a hotel. So if I now calculate all of that, so the prawn might be giving me a 44% of or 50%. So if I might get for 15K and sell for 30K, so the prawn might be giving me like some 50% food ratio. But other food items like, and the fast moving food items like, let's say, yam and egg sauce. Yam and egg sauce might cost you just 1,000 naira to make, direct cost per portion. But you can be selling it for 6,000 naira. And what does that give you is less than a 15% food ratio. So at the end of the day, your global ratio will be the 16%. The 50. I wish I was showing you
So
this thing. You'll be able to see it. I'm so sorry, guys. I really apologize. My phone crashed without notice. But Demola will send you the format so you can share with anybody who's interested. Maybe on the group, they can come to Pastures page and DM, and I would send you a format of the costing. People pay millions for this costing, but I'm ready to share it with you free. You can use that to work on your costing in your hotel, in your establishment, in your whatever it is, and you see how it will just be really easy. So yeah, the global ratio is just going to show you globally your average ratio. So to pick from the 16% you're making here, the 40% you're making from prawns, the 25%, and you give you a global ratio. Once it is between 25 to 33%, then you are safe. But if it's anything more than 33%, bear in mind that inflation could happen 2, 3 months after. And inflation happens, you cannot always change your price every time there's an inflation. So when you are doing your costing, you are thinking about, okay, what happens if there's an inflation in 3 months? Am I ready for that hit? What happens when inflation in 5 months? Am I ready for that hit? So your costing must be able to cover up for foreseen. So I rather would prefer you do it with 5 to 5%. For to answer the question now, for For restaurants and for lounges that are not in hotels, for solo restaurants, for fast foods, your overhead is usually higher than the hotel overhead cost. I tell you why. Because now hotel will have rooms for sale, they will have marquees and events halls for sale. So when you put all of that, a lot of things are taking up the diesel charge, a lot of things are taking up the salary charge. So if you get some money from rooms, get some money here. But for restaurants, for fast foods, for your lounges, your restaurants that are independent restaurants and not in a hotel, you realize that it's only the food that is taking all of the costs. So you must be doing between an 18 to 25% food cost. Some people say 33%, but I don't agree. And I've always worked with this 18 to 25% food cost because um, if you are doing this, you'll be safe. So in case you set your prices now in April and by November, rice is going to 100K, your food cost can still hold on to that. And maybe at that point, it'll give you some 33%. And when you are comfortable making those profits, people are increasing prices, but your restaurant is not increasing price. And what everybody's wondering, how are you doing it? Because you've planned it earlier than now to do that. So between 18 to 25% as a maximum, because your overhead cost will be so high. Overhead cost on diesel, and no other, except you have a restaurant that has other things like a lounge, like an event center. But if it's a fast food, every cost is relying on the backs of the meals that you cook every day and you sell every day. So your overhead cost has to be higher. So that is why you have to make sure that your costing is a bit lower than it should be. And that your costing, I'm not saying your costing for one meal, your global ratio. So you're looking at your entire global ratio. I remember I said your global ratio is when you go to I just remind me, I'll send you this format so you can see it. And thank God this is recorded, so you can always play it back and look at it and understand what I'm saying in case you at some point get a bit confused. So your global ratio is every food item, the singular ratio of every food item. If you have 20 menu items, I'll do the ratio for every 20 food items on the menu. Then I'll do the average. So I'll put the ratio together divided by the average. That's a 20. You get your global ratio. That's your average ratio. And then it must be for a quick fast food or restaurant must be between 18 to 25%, and for hotels must be between 25 to 33%. So because and for those obvious reasons. So yeah, let me see if I can take some questions. Okay, if he says she's interested in getting the costing from us, of course, yes, I'll be more than happy to share that with you. Just so that yeah. So what should the direct food cost for regular restaurant? I've already said that. What should the food cost for QSR? Yeah, QSR restaurant be? I've already said that as well.
Okay,
Should it be
just
between?
yeah,
Yeah,
so
go
just
on.
to ask you, but if you mentioned that restaurants, if I get you clearly, you're saying that the food cost for restaurants should be lower than the hotels because for the hotels there are other things that are carrying all of those costs. But I think the reverse is the case in the industry currently, and I can imagine a QSRs or a regular restaurant on the road trying to price their food higher than a hotel, or something like that. I feel like that restaurant will not get the kind of traction that I expected. Or is it about the quality of the restaurant? Is it about the whole branding and all that? Um how can we navigate through this page? Because I feel the reality is that despite the fact that in the hotels they have other income elements sharing the cost, but still their food is still pricier than the QSRs. So is it about the cost of the food? Rather, is it about the selling price of the food, or is it about the buying price of the food? Thank you.
That's a very good question, Debola. Very good question, and I'm going to explain to you. Now, it might look as though the only reason these hotels make more money is because obviously they have more. Like a hotel like Novotel, for example, you can tell that every day you must have at least 200 persons eating at Novotel. And obviously, if you see the profit going back at the end of the day, you'll be surprised. You might see the numbers, maybe they're making for food 120 million, 110 million for food this month. But you'll be surprised sometimes they might even be running at loss. And do you know why? Now, this is because, for example, salaries are really high. They don't buy the items as cheap as certain items. For example, some restaurants, that's why I say all of these things they play. Some restaurants might be they have a procurement team to go and buy the items directly, or they have a quicker just Demola, you should know they might have a quicker payment period. But because of the payment plan for certain hotels, you see they will have to put more markups. They have to not just for the food as well, the gas, everything. They're marking up everything, marking up the diesel price because they're not paying diesel as it's coming. So now you are coming. So it will shock you to know that the costs for producing a plate of rice in a restaurant that charges you 4,000 or 5,000 for rice and chicken, and you go to. So another thing is, what I gave is an ideal situation, right? However, every company has its marketing strategy. Some company will tell you that, oh, we want to do the turnover system. We want more people come, like the Chicken Republic was doing the 715 naira plate of rice. They might be making their cost for that food, both direct and indirect, for that 800 naira plate might come to about 750. They might just making 15 per plate, but they are trying to use the turnover system. The turnover system could be used for either marketing strategy, so more people can know the brand. That way, if you increase the price gradually, you already have gained people's trust.
Wow. Okay, I'm sure it's been very interesting and exciting evening. I don't know if we've learned or heard anything. So is there anyone who wants to help? There was a question I was trying to ask now. Anyone who would also like to provide a feedback to that, feel free to give a comment so that we could also learn. Anyone in house? Okay. So I'm sure if we haven't if we've learned something tonight, something that is very key first is that there's one powerful statement Chef Jerry said that food cost comes before pricing. Many times, even as business owners, not just even around the food industry, we have set the price for our product. Especially those of us who are into, whether we like it or not, the food industry is like you're into manufacturing, you are producing. So imagine whereby you have already set your price. Let's say I'm producing a mini chinchin for it, or maybe I'm producing plantain chips. Then I come to tell myself that, other plantain chips are selling for 100 naira. So in competition with the market, it means that I must also sell for 100 naira. So you've not factored in, you've not considered your food costs, and you have already set your price. Your production quality, your material sourcing and all that may be different from what the market is. Yes, using what the prevailing prices is to juxtapose on your price may be a good thing so that you can know whether you are overpricing your product or underpricing your product. But go ahead with picking up on that, you must go back, sit down with your books and understand what your food cost is. And just as I've been said, depending on your product line, of course, the food cost for producing a chicken may be different from that of rice, may be different from that of the stew, maybe. But for every portion of production, you must understand what your food cost is. And like what Chef Jerry has said, the average, depending on the industry or the space where you are serving, if you are in the hotel space, you should be considering anywhere between, I think, 25 to 33%. And if you're a QSR or maybe a regular business, food business that is not within the hotel space, you should be looking at around anywhere between 18 to 25%, considering that your overhead, you have other overhead, which are rent, salaries, your salaries, your electricity, your diesel cost, especially if you are building something that looks very branded. One of the heaviest things we'll spend on is power. And currently in the country, power is not going down, power is not getting cheap. So you must be able to consider your indirect. What's the percentage of your indirect cost? And what is the percentage of your direct cost? Valuable if we should continue doing this month on month, or we can just stop at this point. If Miracle, any feedback or comment from you before we drop the evening?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Mr. Nkere.
I want to thank Chef Jerry, although he still started talking fast again, but we try to cope. I think that we may need to do something like this again, because my issue is the issue of how do you relate your indirect cost to not be a part of your total costing of your food. For example, now you are cooking a plate of eba and one pomo and soup. What percentage of that cost should be your rent for your shop rent, for example? What percentage should be your NEPA bill, for example? How do you relate all that, to the cost? For direct cost of food is easier because you know how much you bought the ingredients, you can break it down in terms of measurements. And with this thing you have just taught us now in terms of standardizing your recipe, which I think is very important, we can determine direct cost. But indirect cost, how do you break that down into one plate of eba and soup? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Very, very key and valid. One of the things we'll do again is that I see that this food costing is something that is very critical for many of us in the industry. So we might look at maybe having a part 2 of it again before we move to a new topic. Why not let extensively deal with this food cost? So maybe in the next edition again, most likely I'm just thinking we can do a part 2, have it as a part 2, and have us come again to come and learn. So what we will do is that before then, I can see a lot of questions. So what we'll do now is that let's harmonize all the questions. I'm sure Kelvin is tracking all the questions. I'm seeing more questions coming. I'll get, okay, copy. I saw one question Kelvin dropped for me somewhere. So we will then put all the questions together, share with Chef Jerry, and trust that we will have a second. Okay, so someone is asking, what is recipe standardization? Someone is trying to ask that. Then we will pick all the questions that even what you just mentioned now. How do you harmonize your indirect cost into a plate of eba, one for one? How do you factor that in? So maybe you may need to come out practically to be able to put this together. So that's what we'll do. We'll have a part B or a second session on this topic so that we can have it extensively dealt with again. We're excited in Pastures to keep doing this over and over again. Suffice to let us know that this is the first edition. This is the first edition of this Culinary Panorama. And the goal is to give a 360-degree perspective, 360-degree education around the culinary industry. And we're happy that you've stayed up until this time. And I'm sure we've been able to help give adequate information, give adequate knowledge until we come again your way next month around same time. So this will continue last Sunday of every month, 4 p.m. We'll meet again to have this engagement. Do have a wonderful evening and thank you for your time. See you again next month. Bye.